This is Real Talk with Leigh Brown. Today's program is bringing you a different accent, although I don't have one. We do have a British accent today. We've got Chris Webb, and he's going to bring you so many different insights in and around real estate, England, and just lots of conversation. So I think you're going to want to stick around, and I'll see you on the other side. Well, I really appreciate you reaching out and being willing to come on the show, and also for being willing to come on twice since the first effort failed because the button was missing, but the button's back. So yay, technology. Absolutely. So why don't you kick it off a little bit and tell my audience, who is Chris Webb? Where are you located? What do you do in the world? And give us a little thumbnail sketch of you.
Yes, as people can probably pick up my accent pretty quickly, I'm British. Apologies about that. So I've been in the property world for the last 20-something years, hence the hairline and wrinkles and whatever else. I've kind of been there, done that. It was my first proper job when I was 18 years old, and sort of worked my way through from junior negotiator who basically, made the tea and showed people around properties, and then went to negotiator, senior negotiator, branch manager, regional branch manager, and then I was national performance director with the Property Franchise Group, which is the biggest franchising group within the UK. We look after lots of sort of very high street brands, and I did that for 5 years, which was fantastic. And then I went out on my own. I had my own coaching business for the last couple of years or so. And sort of my goal in a nutshell is to make the agents I work with the obvious choice for local sellers.
Okay, so I have so many questions. All right. And the first one's kind of easy for my American audience. Why are y'all called estate agents over there and not real estate agents? What's the difference between an estate agent and real estate? I've always been fascinated by the name difference.
Not a lot in the grand scheme of things. So we are getting more and more Americanized is probably the term. And so we've got people like Keller Williams over here, for example. We've got EXP who are getting bigger and bigger over here. And with that sort of, let's say, invasion, we are getting more and more sort of Americanized in the grand scheme of things. So you will find you'll talk to probably one or two in every 50 agents will say, I work in real estate, or I'm a real estate. And it'll be more kind of American-based lingo, but for 99% of the time, you'll be, I'm an estate agent, and that's kind of just the lingo we have in the country.
Okay, well, it's obviously proof that I like to watch British movies, that I even know that phrase. All right, so now we got to dig into the fact that this was your first actual job. So does that mean in England and Great Britain overall, can you get paid as an 18-year-old in real estate? Are you guys on a set compensation schedule as opposed to the U.S. where everybody's an independent contractor and you don't get paid until you sell? Give us a little bit of the how it works on the other side of the pond.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've got kind of three big options out there. So you've got sort of working for a large corporate estate agency business, and they'd be kind of like national brands, and you'll be employed, basic salary and some commission on top of it. But mostly your basic salary is probably 80% of what you'll take home every month. It's a few £100 here, a few £100 there, so it's not massive. So you've got the security of having a proper job, inverted commas, and that sort of pay packet at the end of the month. That's sort of the large corporate side. Then you've got independent estate agencies, which are a smaller version of a corporate business. So they will have, instead of having 100 branches, they might have 1 or 5 or 10. They're kind of much more sort of localized in that local area. Again, it's heavily focused on, here's your salary, and if you do a good job, you get a little bit of extra money, sort of commission on top of it. And then you've got self-employed estate agents, which you'll be far more used to in your neck of the woods, which is pretty much exactly what you've got in the States, of which no basic salary, most people kind of tee up with a brokerage, for example, and then there's sort of a commission split once you sell a property. So 0 basic, and you kind of eat what you kill.
Okay, so in the real world implementation of having people on all those different plans, because we don't have a whole lot of salaried people here in the U.S., although there is one firm that has tried it, but they did not tend to attract the people, how do I say this nicely, who were super motivated. Because obviously, if you are on commission, you have to have the discipline and the drive to go make it happen. And if you're being paid, some people still have that drive and others don't. So is there a market difference when it comes to what the consumer gets if they call one of the brands that does a draw versus somebody who's got a true self-employed person? Does the consumer feel the difference, basically?
So the weighting in the UK at the moment with regard to who's got the majority of not necessarily market share, but kind of where most sort of jobs are, being a self-employed estate agent in the UK is probably 5% of the marketplace. So it's
Oh, very few.
real minority. It is getting bigger, and it's sort of the projection is by probably 5 years time or so, it might be like 20%. So there's one part of the marketplace that is really, really growing. It is the self-employed side of things because of work-life balance and more money, etc. So lots of the agents who have been employed, and instead of earning £100 worth of commission for selling a property, for example, they're like, well, why don't I go self-employed and earn £5,000 for selling a property? So there's a lot more sort of financial upside in that situation. Does that mean there's a difference in service with regard to corporate versus sort of a one-person band? I would love to say no, but the answer is probably yes. Because if you are part of a big business, you can be very slopey shoulders. Oh, it's not my department. It's not my job. Oh, that's Bob's issue. And that's the accounting's department sort of thing. When you're a one-person band, like, well, Merry Christmas. You are the accounting department. You are the head of, property photographs, you're the head of bin emptying, you are literally the everything of everything sort of thing. So there's basically nowhere to hide. And in 9 times out of 10, it's literally your name above the door. So it makes the complaint letter quite easy to write.
Right. So it's hilarious that people think they have more work-life balance as a self-employed, but people don't understand till you become one that the work-life balance is that you have none. And so that's really funny. And I'm fairly confident that my viewers and listeners are burning up the comments when they heard that, because they're laughing to themselves because they heard that myth once upon a time. And then they find out when you get into this that, yes, you can take as much time off as you want. However, you're going to pay for that. And so you have the choice is very clear, but it's hard to sustain if you don't keep moving. Now, when we look at the realities of how things operate, I'm curious about the ability for the average person in England to buy property. Is it accessible to most people? What does your affordability look like for, let's just say, the young person who's 23 years old and they finished university and they've got their first real job? Do they have a chance at buying, or is it something that's only accessible as you get to the next stage of life?
If you're 23 years old, you are going to need probably 99% of the time, you're going to need some help from the bank and mum and dad in a big way. The average house price in the UK is about £300,000. The average salary in the UK is just over about £30,000. So you're looking at sort of 10 times the average salary to get your average home, which is obviously a huge multiple in the grand scheme of things and has been growing massively. We've had property prices really go up in the UK, even in the last kind of 4 or 5 years or so, since sort of 2020 sort of direction. Salaries have not done the same thing. I can think back to when I was 18 years old, the salaries that employed estate agents were getting paid back then, it's pretty much exactly the same now. It hasn't moved up much over that time. I'd say the average person struggles to buy a home in the UK, without a doubt. And it's very much you either go into rented accommodation, which is being sort of punched in every direction currently in the UK with legislation, etc., which means there's less properties to rent, which means the rent goes up for the ones that are on the market currently, which means it's very hard to save for your next property. And then that kind of leans in down the line. So if you're paying £2,000 a month for rent sort of thing, and then you're going, great, well, just save up that, £30,000, £50,000 to get your deposit down. Most people are like, I just can't do that and actually still have a life. So the sort of amount of time that people move from property to property is getting longer and longer. So people are staying put for longer periods of time. And the average age of people buying property is getting later and later and later, because more and more people are just staying in rented for life, or they're living with their mum and dad. You're going to struggle to buy a house in the UK. To give sort of some context on this, if you're looking to buy a place in London, I've got lots of clients who work on the outskirts of London. It's not even like central London, and for them, a first-time buyer property is like £600,000 to £800,000.
So I know that we're spoiled and soft in America, and I don't think anybody can argue with that. But one thing people don't seem to understand is that we have a different ability to buy because we do have government-backed mortgages with lower down payment environments. What is the least amount of down payment you can do in the UK right now? Because you don't have 100% financing, correct?
We did, and that was in 2007, 2008, and obviously we know what happened then. So I think the UK kind of government and the legislation around it sort of got its fingers burnt sort of in the credit crunch in sort of 2007, 2008. And they're now going, okay, actually, we need to kind of means test people in a lot harder way. So historically, yes, you should better get 100% mortgages and sort of self-certification mortgages where you kind of just said, oh, yeah, I promise I earn £100,000 a year. Yeah, exactly. Those are the days, eh? But now it's far stricter. So not only do they say, great, you've got to have this much deposit, and this is what the rate is today. Well, actually, if the rate went up by a couple of notches, can you still afford it? So they're very much stress testing it. So it's all well and good to go, I can just about afford it. It just about adds up for me sort of thing. But then when you go to the affordability side of things, they'll go, actually, worst case scenario, if the rate went up by a couple of notches, are you actually able still to live in your property? And if they go, no, you can't, then mortgage won't get approved and you're done from there. So it's certainly quite tough. Unless you've got a decent salary and a decent deposit or a mum and dad that love you very, very much, you're going to struggle.
So is that 20% down, 10% down? What do you think the normal?
The minimum for most mortgages, sort of the rule of thumb is about 10%. That's kind of the rule of thumb. You can get mortgages for less. I mean, if you're doing a buy-to-let mortgage to rent a property out, you're looking more like 20-25% as a minimum. But sort of a personal residence, 10% as an absolute minimum. The rates only start getting moderately decent at like 15%.
So there you go, American people, quit complaining so much. My goodness, that stress testing of mortgages is wild. I had not heard of that. And that would really block a lot of people from getting into a property, and something to pay attention to, because an idea overseas can absolutely mark itself here. Now, you said that the prices were going up and wages were stagnant starting around 2020. How much of that do you think has been in migration to England from other countries? Is that having an impact on supply and demand where you are, as we're seeing here?
We obviously had Brexit a few years ago, which I won't get into the politics about whether that was the right or wrong thing to do. But obviously you had a lot of foreign money in London especially. And you generally find that London is almost like the beating heart of the UK. So if London has a, plus 5%, for example, give it 6 months or so, that'll ripple out from London and everyone else will have a great time 2 months later, 6 months later, a year later. If London's having a tough time, that'll ripple out from there as well. So what we saw post-Brexit is lots of the investment that came from overseas just stopped doing it, because they're like, we're not quite sure whether we can have a visa to stay here. Do we have to buy another property to stay here? And any kind of uncertainty, people just go, no, I'm not doing it. I'm just going to kind of stay safe and kind of buy a house in my own country effectively. So we had a large sort of withdrawal of foreign investment in our country at that sort of time. And that eventually sort of rippled out across the board. Now, that was a probably 1 or 2 year period where you felt the effects of it. Obviously, Brexit was probably more than a couple of years now. So it's more kind of returning back to some sort of normality. But certainly there's still, compared to where we were, there's a lack of investment in the UK from overseas because they're just not quite sure what's going on with it at the moment.
So outside of the investment piece, you do have humans that are migrating in. They may not have any dollars. And from what I read, and of course that's colored by whichever author I'm reading, there's a lot of people who've moved in from third world countries who have their bills paid by the government, which said, obviously, no matter where you are politically, listeners, you have to stop looking at everything from a standpoint, from a number standpoint. Those are people who take up rental spaces and take up government dollars. And so I'm curious if that's had an impact on people if they live inside central London, if they go to the outskirts. And have you seen any impact, or is the news giving us just one viewpoint or the other viewpoint?
Yeah, I mean, the conversation here is probably sort of legal migration versus illegal migration. So does illegal migration give us a big headache? Yes, I'm sure it probably does with regard to putting people in hotels and looking after them. We're quite a caring country, so we're not one to kind of toss people back and say, see you later. We're quite kind of look after people on that side, which is probably the right thing to do. Whereas, legal migration side of things, yes, you've got people coming from overseas, which does put a crunch around certain price ranges. And that's for sales and for lettings as well. So, less supply, more demand, and, the prices go up. So this is why there's a huge demand for things like starter homes, for example. The UK government, it's almost a bit of an ongoing joke. Pretty much every single year, they pledge to build 300,000 houses. We're going to build 300,000 houses. They never hit it. It's just like a made-up figure. And they'll always go, yes, we're going to do it. We're going to build more properties so we can get some more houses. And it just doesn't happen ever. So there's a big sort of delay in that coming through, where there's less and less properties people moving, there's less and less people who can actually afford properties, so therefore prices just go up off the back of it. So yes, if you are looking to rent a property, for example, yes, you might be competing with people who have moved from other countries into the UK, and it's going to make yourself a bit of a headache on that side just because there's more competition across the board. And if they come from a more affluent background and they can just throw money at the problem, then congratulations, they'll probably get the rental property.
So basically, your politicians lie to you just like ours lie to us. So that's what we got in common. Woohoo!
Yeah,
but I will
that's a given. That is an absolute given. Across the board.
They just want to get elected. But the reality is, whether you're talking about legal immigration or illegal immigration, there's still numbers. And so when you start paying attention across the board, you have to figure out that supply and demand is a real economic concept that has an impact on everybody, whether native, legal, immigration, illegal immigrant, doesn't matter. And I think it'd be good if we in real estate got really focused on paying attention to numbers so that when we get a promise of 300,000 properties being built, we then can look at the metrics and say, do we need that many? Do we need less? Do we need more? Based on the metrics of the humans that live there, then we could actually probably drive some good policy decisions and some results based on what we're told. But that means everybody's got to take their temperature down a notch so that we can figure things out, because I do think most people want to do right by other people in some way, shape, or form. And what that looks like can have a lot to do with the realities of the numbers. Now, that being said, selfishly, I want to ask a question because I'm a history nerd and I love how old some of your real estate is. We don't have that over here. I mean, my family in the place where I live in North Carolina, we go back to the 1700s. We were some of those pioneers who came over when this was a colony. And we don't have any of those houses left. There is a very occasional house from the 1800s, but our architecture is not old and it doesn't have that same history that y'all have of royalty, kings and queens and empires. And what's the oldest house you've ever sold, Chris, or even looked at?
Well, I think there's quite a big, there's always an article saying this is the oldest restaurant in the UK, or this is the oldest pub in the UK. There's always lots of those.
That's advertising.
And you'll correct my inaccuracy here. Someone might fact check me and go onto Google. I'm pretty sure the oldest building that is now a restaurant in Winchester, I think it's 1463 or something like that. It's pretty old in the grand scheme of things. You have to really duck down for a lot of the doorways and beams. Like, they were definitely shorter back then, to say the least. So, but for ourselves, Victorian properties are really common. We built a lot of properties in the sort of Victorian era, which is obviously turn of the 1900s sort of thing. So older properties, bread and butter, thatched cottages, Victorian homes, Georgian homes, properties from the 1800s. Just another weekday. It's nothing special. There's certain times in the UK where we built lots of properties and not built so many properties, and certainly the term the last century was when we built the most. Victoria properties are left, right, and centre, and then you get lots in sort of the 50s and 60s, sort of post-war sort of direction as well. But if you're on period properties, come work in property in the UK, you'll be tripping over. It'll be like Downton Abbey all over again.
So, did you say thatched cottages? Is that still a thing?
Yep, 100%. Yeah, we get thatched cottages.
How is that not a fire hazard? Because in my world, I can just imagine some smoker flicking the butt and then there goes the roof up. Is there a real roof underneath it and the thatch is for cuteness now? How does that work?
No, it is a thatched, it is straw, it is dried, it is very flammable. You need to get it replaced. So generally speaking, you replace certain parts of the roof every 5-10 years or so. Other parts you do every 15-20 years. Very flammable, it's quite hard to get insurance on it, as you might imagine, because of that reason. But, I live in the south coast of the UK, and if you drove around the New Forest one day, you could spot 200 thatched cottages. Like, it's not an uncommon thing in any way.
Okay, that's so cool. And that means as an estate agent, you probably have on your list of trusted professionals somebody who specializes in thatched roofs, don't you?
Yep, 100%. And the good news is it's, once you found one, a bit of a dying trade, as you might imagine, not really building any new thatched cottages. So when you find a thatcher, you've got them for life, effectively.
So you need to find some 18-year-olds to go apprentice with that thatcher to keep the trade alive.
100%. It's if you're a good thatcher and you're in an area with thatched cottages, for example, you've pretty much got a job for life.
That's so cool. Did not expect to hear that. And when you're just rattling off all these different kinds of properties. And then I have to ask one more question before you tell your story, because London is Jack the Ripper. Was that true? And have you ever seen the houses and alleys where that went down?
So have I been to the Jack Ripper Street? No, I've been to Baker Street quite a few times, which is where Sherlock Holmes is from.
I'm so sad now. I expected you to have.
I know. Jack the Ripper was a real thing. It wasn't Johnny Depp, I'm afraid to say. It was a real thing, and there are parts of London you can go to where absolutely is very. London is a very historic place with lots and lots and lots and lots of history, to say the least. And I think the shortcoming of being British is that you sort of overlook it somewhat. It's a bit like if I came to North Carolina and I was like, oh my God, it's beautiful here, these fields, and you've got these buildings, and this is like lovely sort of thing. And you might, yeah, it's just where I live. Like, it's just where I live. So we've got, where I live, we've got Winchester Cathedral, which is centuries old, enormous cathedral. I've only been inside it once, and I walked inside and I was like, wow, this is actually really, really nice. And I've lived in Winchester for 39 years. So you don't really appreciate what's on your doorstep so much. But if I was, a tourist coming to London, I'd be like, oh my God, there's so many things to go and see. There's so many, there's Sherlock Holmes, there's, Jack the Ripper, there's, all this stuff from that sort of era.
So that means, friends, wherever you live, you need to go be a tourist in your own city for a couple of days and go see all the things that I would ask you about and that Chris would be fascinated by, because we do all live in really interesting places. But as you point out, we don't always pay attention to it. Now, of course, I love hearing the crazy things that happen in and around real estate, in and around dealing with the general public when it comes to their housing, because housing is so emotional and personal. And of course, our stories over here have involved dead people in open houses and basements full of lint. And so I'm really curious as to what kind of interesting things you've seen since you've worked in so many angles of real estate, and you've done it since you were barely shaven.
Well, it depends how PG-13 this podcast is. So
I don't think let's listen to this. They're not interested in it. So
that's a relief then.
If you're going to be tacky, then everybody put earmuffs on your little people for Chris's story now.
So I've had a dead body. I've had that. I've had that other situation where we had, bless her, she was a lovely old lady, and normally she would be asleep in her chair sort of thing in front of the TV when we do viewings, and we'd kind of just work around her and kind of go. So it wasn't a huge surprise that she was in her chair and not making the most noise in the world. And then obviously during the viewing, we worked out that she was actually no longer alive. That was a interesting one, to say the least.
Now, hang on a minute. So this lady was sitting in her chair for every showing, and y'all just walked around?
It was just normally she would get up and say hello and let you in and all those bits and pieces. But this one time she was still in her chair. We had a key to the front door, so we obviously knocked a few times and, hi, you in, sort of thing. We're coming in. And then she just sat in front of the chair, thought nothing of it, looked at a few rooms, kind of went past and said, well, let's introduce you to the seller on the way past, sort of thing. And we're like, okay, she is no longer with us, should we say. So that's one thing I've had. I've had
Wait. What did you do? Did you call the police?
Yeah. It was an instant phone call to the police. Don't touch anything. The viewing stops now. Police turn up now. Ambulance turns up now. Statement made to the police. I was in contact with their family because obviously they were elderly, so we dealt with their kids. So I was the one who actually had to phone their daughter and say, look, I've just done a viewing and this is what's going on. That was a tough conversation, to say the least. So yeah, that's one thing. I've had the armed police turn up at a viewing before. That was quite interesting. So it was probably must have been about 5-6 years ago, but they just released a brand new Range Rover, and the clients had just bought it. It looked really nice, sat on their driveway, sort of thing. And probably about 5 minutes before the viewing, someone had jumped over their back gates. They had kicked their back doors in of the property. They'd gone through the property, they'd picked up the TV, they'd picked up the keys to the Range Rover, gone out the front door, put the TV in the Range Rover, and then driven off. And so between them doing that And obviously the neighbours or the homeowner calling the police, I just greeted the buyers or potential buyers around the corner and said, "Hi, nice to meet you. Did you find it all okay? How was your drive, etc." Literally walking around the corner, you got to the end of the driveway, all the police cars like skidding onto the driveway, armed police getting out, and I was okay. So that was a interesting one. That was obviously police statements taken. Strange enough, they didn't buy the property, as you might imagine.
Yeah, they decided that neighborhood was not for them, I guess,
Yeah,
even though property crime happens everywhere.
absolutely. So that was quite a interesting one, to say the least. I've, the number of times I've walked in people, how can I put this? Sharing a passionate moment is probably the best way of phrasing that. That has happened more than a few times, usually in rental properties where you confirm the appointment and they kind of don't necessarily care quite so much because it's not their properties. They're like, "Oh, we've got a viewing on Saturday." They kind of forget about it. One thing leads to another. And then you're kind of knocking on the front door and saying, "Hello, hello, is anyone in?" Walk upstairs and you're like, "Okay, there's at least 2 people in." So that has happened quite a few times as well. So there's many things in the estate agency world that I've kind of gone through that are very eye-opening, to say the least. It certainly gives you a very interesting perspective on the public and how people live their lives, maybe slightly differently from yourself, should we say.
I mean, what's funny to me is that for you, you're like, dead people, police, people getting after it. You just seem so low key about it. Is it normal in England that people don't leave for a viewing? Because over here, we primarily coach our sellers to be away so that the buyers can look at the house with their agent and have some privacy. Is it normal that your sellers don't leave?
They should leave. So 99.99% of the time, we'll say to them, "Look, go out. Obviously, we want to talk about negotiation or, what we think the property is worth or what they want to do to it. Want some honest feedback then and there rather than people being polite to people." So normally, yes, absolutely, homeowners would go out. There are certain situations when someone's, very, very elderly, for example, and they can't actually go out, where we'll kind of go, "Right, well, you just sit in your conservatory. We'll kind of work around you," sort of thing. So the minority of the times, homeowners will stay in. Majority of the time, they'll go out.
So basically, you're just the unflappable Chris Webb. None of this bothers you. You just keep rolling along with the punches.
Well,
And maybe it will bother other people who haven't seen as much as you have.
I think I'd imagine it's a bit like being, like a doctor or an undertaker or something like that. You get a very sort of thick/dark sense of humor quite quickly with regard to what you kind of see and what you go through. And when I first started estate agency when I was 18 years old, my job was literally viewings. So every day I would probably do 15 to 20 viewings on a property, times that by 6 days per week sort of thing, times that by a couple of years. You see inside a lot of properties, meet a lot of people very, very quickly. And I went from a very shy, wouldn't say boo to a goose, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm going to meet strangers and talk to them," to like, I've met 15 to 30 people per day, every single day. I can't walk down Winchester High Street without saying hello to 15 people. You get kind of thrown in the deep end quite quickly. So I think you kind of develop that thicker skin, or I don't know how to quite define it, but you've kind of been there, done that, got the t-shirt very quickly, and it takes a lot to phase you.
Well, from that perspective, the young people talk a lot about exposure therapy these days, where if there's something you're scared of, you got to throw yourself into it. And now that you've said that, maybe more 18-year-olds need to get into real estate so they would learn how to interact with people without using a device and learn how to have conversations and have eye contact. I think you might be on to something there.
I would really recommend it. So I, as a young man, was very shy, to say the least, and literally wouldn't say boo to a goose, and then entered the world of estate agency where they're like, "Right, here's the phone. That's how it works. Here's your database. Get on with it," sort of thing. Right, you're meeting this many people today. And Winchester's quite an affluent area in the grand scheme of things. You meet lots of people that are fairly important, like MPs and celebrities and athletes and stuff like that. So you're not dealing with like just first-time buyer properties or anything like that. So you're dealing with people who are kind of know their stuff, to say the least. So you very much get put in the deep end. And at the time, slightly painful and very much out of my comfort zone. But in hindsight, looking back, probably exactly what I needed, the best thing that could have got me out my shell, sort of thing. Put yourself best foot forward, and you kind of think to yourself, "Yeah, I can do this." So I'd absolutely recommend it.
So now that you've moved into the coaching and the general guiding phase of your professional life, do you find it's getting harder and harder to find these estate agents that are willing to make phone calls? And I asked that because I interviewed an agent last week, and I asked her how comfortable she was on the phone. And she's like, I don't want to call people. And I said, but you need to, because that's the best way to talk to people. And she wants to just use this. I said, it's not the same thing, because it's not a two-way street. This is one way, and the telephone is two-way. She, for the life of her, couldn't get her mind around it. And so I don't know that we're a good fit together, but are you seeing that same trend overseas?
I think that, yes, absolutely. And I feel like it's, and I'll be very stereotypical here, and I'll do a lot of whitewashing if that's okay. Generally speaking, sort of the younger you are, the more scared of picking up the phone and calling people you are, because I'm just about old enough or young enough to remember when, people just had landlines and you used to phone up and speak to their mum and say, hi, is Johnny there? And is he coming out to play, sort of thing. So therefore you kind of had to get over that quite quickly. I think these days, most people sort of almost shudder at the thought of their phone ringing. Think, oh my God, my phone's going to make some noise and I have to speak to somebody. Like, I'm not answering, that sort of thing. So there is that sort of more mentality of actually saying, for me as the agent, it's easier to text somebody, or it's easier to voice note them, or it's easier for them to, send them an email. Yes, it might be easier, but is it as effective? So I think ultimately, I would always say the true line in the sand for any kind of sales communication is what you get out of it. So it's very well and good having a long text message conversation for an entire day. But if I go, fantastically, what do you get from that? And you're like, well, nothing. I just had a nice chat with this nice lady. Well, that's not really much of a sales call. That's just a nice social phone call. So I would look at it and go, what's the best possible route to get the best possible result? I think it's very hard to influence people over text message because, wave your hands frantically if you're listening to this, if you've fallen out with your partner over text message before. And the reason why is because, if you look at human communication, about 5% of it is in the words we actually use. Because, so, if you're looking with if I gave you, right, here's 5% of the information and you get to make up the other 95, then of course you can get it wrong a few times. I texted my partner a while ago saying, oh, do you mind if I go to the pub tonight with the guys? And she texts back saying, yes, of course, that's fine. But stupidly, I believe that. But actually, if I'd had a conversation with her, she would have gone, oh, yeah, you go to the pub tonight. Yeah, you have a good time with your friends. Yeah, don't worry about me. I'll stay at home. And I'll be like, red flags are flashing here, because there's so much more you can get across. So when you're having a conversation with someone over the phone, you can actually say, right, they're saying, are they happy to hear from you or not? Is a good place to start. If they answer the phone and like, oh, hi, Leigh, so nice to hear from you. How are you? How's your day going? You're like, great. They think I'm fantastic. That's a really good start. If they answer the phone and go, yeah, what? You're like, okay, I'm on the back foot here straight away. So tone and sort of the way you communicate will carry such good weight with it that it's very hard to influence someone to kind of see things your way or to change their mind with it just by texting them repeatedly. So absolutely, phone should be your number one go-to. And I think
it's such a great point to talk about that catastrophizing that we can be subject to because we don't know the other person's viewpoint, or that we assume because we're in a place that's looking for the worst possible outcome. But as you said, you can't influence either direction. And maybe she wouldn't have been irritated at all if you'd had a chance to influence her, but you didn't even give yourself the opportunity. And so it's all about opportunity. I'm just kind of amazed by it, that people are avoiding opportunity for the sake of comfort, and then they wonder why their success isn't as high as it could be.
And I think it's about looking at the time management for yourself as well. So there's being busy for the sake of being busy. So I had a chat with a new client the other day, and I said, what's your diary look like? How are you spending your time? They're like, well, I spend about 3 to 4 hours every day using email. And I was like, right, okay, red flag flashing straight away, sort of thing. I said to them, you will never get an email from me longer than like a sentence long. If it's a sentence long, I'll type it in. Yes, no problem at all. We'll see you on Wednesday. Thanks very much. Send. That's what you're going to get from me. If it's anything longer than that, you've got 2 options. Either I'm going to call you and just say, I was just about to email you, thought I'd give you a quick call instead because it's a bit quicker. Job done. 5-minute phone call saves 25 minutes worth of typing.
Yes.
Or if I don't think that is the right format, I will just press record on my webcam. I'll embed it into an email and say, I was just about to email you. By the way, what's happening with X, Y, and Z? What's going on with this? And press send. So, either way, I think if people are afraid to pick up the phone, I mean, heaven forbid when they have to hold a camera in front of their face and record a video to say, hi, hope you're okay, how was this and how was that? So it's about putting yourself out there in the best possible format to get the best possible result for your business. And in some cases, and most cases, it's going to be picking up the phone to people and have that communication with them.
Well, we also have so many agents that are panicked about AI, and are they going to be disrupted by AI? Is it going to run them out of business? Well, the two things AI really can't do is be you on the telephone or be you on a video. But AI could absolutely be your text and your emails. And so if you want to be the best human version of yourself, which, spoiler alert, that's always your best sales tool, is your personality and your energy, be what can't be replicated. And it's not hard. You just have to get used to it.
100%. And I think that, everyone's looking for a USP, and there's a bit of a inside joke in the estate agency world. And that is that every estate agent is the same. And lots of homeowners will go, oh, every agent's the same. You put it on the portals, you wait for the phone to ring, you do some viewings, you put it into sales progression, we hand our keys over, pay you some money and job done sort of thing. So every agent is out there trying to make themselves be different and stand out from the crowd. Well, as you absolutely bang on said there, Leigh, is that the biggest differentiator is yourself. So there's only one Chris Webb, there's only one Leigh in the world. That's where you want to be. So why not double down on that and try and sort of make things unscalable? So yes, I understand that, you could email 2,000 people in one go. Great, that's fine. But actually, if you just picked up the phone, had a conversation with a few people, yes, that isn't quite as scalable. But actually, over time, as AI gets more and more prevalent, those are things going to stand out. People are going to want human connection. They won't want lots of emails with long dashes in and saying this is a game changer. Instead, what they'll want is human communication and real communication.
Ooh, I had to put my reading glasses on and write that down to make yourself unscalable, because that's a big time gold alert fireworks gem right there, Chris Webb. I hope that's the center of your coaching platform to help these agents get really good at what they're doing. If it's not, and I'm stealing it.
No, it's fine. So one of the things we are very passionate about, and one of the things that worked really well, and you'll probably notice this if you go on holiday anytime soon. Lots of the travel locations have worked out that if you can get your people who are on holiday to post on their social media, it's like the best advert you can get. So, for example, if I went to you, Leigh, and said, Leigh, tell me about your business, you'd be like, oh, I'm the best, Chris. I'm amazing. I do this, I do that. I'd be like, well, Leigh, you would say that because it's your business. But if I got someone else to say it and they're like, oh my God, Leigh is amazing. She worked with me 2 months ago. She's done this, she's done that. Suddenly that carries a lot more weight. So actually your goal as an estate agency business or as a real estate business is to get other people talking about your business and ideally posting online as well. So a really nice way of doing this is to sort of line out your process from start to finish. So you're right, what does generating leads in my estate agency business look like? What does it look like when I put a property on the market? What does it look like when I leverage that property to get more instructions on the market? What does it look like when I sell that property? What does it look like when I complete on that property? So you've got a complete process from sort of start to finish. What does that look like? And then take a step back and go, I'm going to sprinkle some glitter on this process. And what are sort of the magic moments that I can put into that process that people are going to go, oh my God, that is so nice. So for me, for example, if I bought a house tomorrow and I moved in and an agent got me a bottle of champagne, I'll be like, okay, fine, it's a bottle of champagne. Congratulations, Mr. Webb, on your new home. That's okay. But they went to me, here, Chris, here's a picture we've got made of your house. There's a watercolor that says Chris's new house on it, moved in on the 1st of September, and here's some presents for your cat. I would be like, oh my God, you haven't spent any more money than a bottle of champagne, but you've actually thought it through about who I am as an individual and made it important for me. And if I came on the market with you tomorrow and you said, Chris, I really appreciate you using me to sell your property. Here's a gift. Here's a welcome to the market gift, and it's got some scented candles in there. It's got some flowers, sort of thing. I'd be like, oh my God, I'm going to take a picture of that, put it on my social media, and be like, oh my God, Leigh is selling my property, and look at this really nice present. No branding on there, any kind of logo or Leigh sells houses, anything like that whatsoever, because if it has your branding on, it's not a gift, it's marketing. So if you just give out nice presents to people, they'll want to put them online, but make it a fantastic, memorable experience from start to finish.
Well, and to your champagne point, what if your clients aren't drinkers? And so that becomes an opportunity to ask them, what is your favorite color? What is your favorite drink? What is your favorite this, favorite that? And we've had this my favorite things forum in our office for years and years, because people will tell you everything they love. And then you can then love them with what they want, not with what you wanted, which goes to the point of not being branded and showing that little bit of thoughtful caring that is absolutely going to set you apart in a crowded marketplace. So I love that. And in fact, it's a good reminder for me to go back to my team and make sure they're still using the My Favorite Things form, because even the best processes can fall off the cliff if you're not paying attention to them. So Chris, if somebody wants to reach out to you about your coaching and consulting or about buying real estate in the UK, what is the best way for them to reach out to you and benefit from your knowledge?
Yeah, so I'm in the very fortunate position that my job is to make myself as easily contactable as possible. So hopefully, if you go pretty much anywhere, you should be able to find me. So if you type in Chris Webb Estate Agent, I've pretty much colonized the first page and second page of Google, so you probably can't miss me. If you go onto Instagram, which is estateagent.consultancy, we're on Facebook, we're on Threads, we're on TikTok, YouTube. Type in Estate Agent Consultancy, Chris Webb. If I don't come up, let me know. I'll be very disappointed.
I mean, that's when you have to go back and create some more content, which that's
Absolutely.
fine. And that's what we do anyway. So, Chris, thank you so much for taking a break from your holiday to come on the show and give us a lot of really interesting insights into a different country's real estate and into some good practices that we can put into place no matter where we are in the world. Thank you so much for sharing with the audience.
I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for having on, Leigh.
All right, everybody, say something nice about Chris in the comments. Give us a like, hit the bell to subscribe, and most importantly, come back and see us next time. Now, if this episode brought you value, made you laugh, cry, or in between, then don't forget to subscribe, leave a 5-star review, and share this with somebody else in the real estate trenches. You will find a Real Talk with Leigh Brown on every major podcast app, so hit follow, and I'll see you in the next conversation. Don't forget to DM me if you've got a story. I might just want to feature you next.